Hi there. So welcome to this week's feedback session. So for those of you that are new, welcome to my channel. So my name's Ed and I do art classes, and each week I try to introduce some aspect or sort of theory of art, and then I try to do a demo which I upload on the Wednesday. And at the moment, I'm currently doing some feedback sessions on Friday. And these are for students that are sort of participating in my online art classes. So there's more details down below if that's interesting for you. And they've sent in some great work this week. So we've had a little bit of a half-term break this week. So there wasn't any theory. But we were carrying on from the previous week in which we talked about doing a master copy, finding an artist whose work you really like, and then using that as the basis to do your own painting with your own reference material. So that's what people have sent me this week. Also dotted in there are a few portraits. So people, including myself, have been enjoying the Sky Arts Portrait Artist of the Week challenge on at the moment, and you can catch up with that on Facebook. Which is, really, I mean, portraits are a great way to practice your drawing. So yeah, it's a great sort of thing to have a go at, and there's so many people doing it. There's sort of quite a good sense of community at the moment with that, so that's worth a look. So what I'm planning to do today is, I think what we'll do is we'll look at the landscape work first, and then I'll have a look at the portrait work after, just to sort of keep them separate, and I can hopefully give you a bit of feedback on both. Okay, so we'll go over to Photoshop and see what people have sent in. Okay, so we're going to start here with Val's painting, and this is based on a Seago painting. Edward Seago, an artist we've mentioned quite a bit on this channel, well worth a look. And Val decided to just sort of have a go at another master copy this week, which is great. And I'm familiar with the original, and yeah, I think she's done a really good job here. So there aren't a great many things to point out. I guess the only couple things that spring to mind might be, if we take this brush here. So you see this background silhouette of mountains, okay? So often this is how landscape artists think, sort of almost like layers, okay? And then as the layers get away from you, they tend to get a bit lighter and a bit bluer. You can refer to this like as a mass, okay, in that it represents like one thing, okay, in this case the mountains. And my suggestion here is that if we go up a bit closer, you can see these white marks in here, and I think they don't help the mass. I would suggest aim to keep the masses simple. So if I pick up some of this color here, okay, we go a bit. So I'm just gonna, now a little bit of variation within the masses is fine, of course, and often you will see like subtle sort of color variations. But if we just put that in there. So, but often what happens is when we're copying either work or working from life, we can have a tendency to overstate the variations within the masses, okay? So what I'm doing here is just simplifying that a bit. So that would be the first thing that springs to mind. Then we could apply that same principle to this land mass here, okay? Now, if I select that, okay, so we're just selecting this sort of dark mass here, okay, and there. Okay, I'm just going to do this quickly just to illustrate the point here. Okay, so if I Now, I think you've done a good job with this, Val, actually, but I'm just going to subtly just darken that mass a bit. If we take the darkness down a touch there, and we don't want to increase the contrast too much, but so if I do that by darkening it like that, what that hopefully does a bit is it makes this mass just push against that background mountain mass a little bit more. Okay, so hopefully you can see the point that I'm trying to make there, which is when you have these layers, try to simplify them as much as possible, and also make them nice and distinct. So you don't want to be too subtle in your paintings, and so it's nice to know this is the foreground and this is the background. So that's my pointer with that one. But yeah, really nice work, Val, and great to see you. You're still painting, so that's brilliant. You'll learn a lot from doing these master copies, hopefully. So I'll look forward to seeing what you do over the coming weeks. Now, okay, so here's this week's entry by a buyer. So a buyer has kindly sent in this one. So he has been looking at the work of Stuart Schills, who is a landscape artist who I mentioned in last week's video. Really good, very nice, sort of loose, intuitive style of painting, which, yeah, I really like that sort of way of working. And so we can see here, Buyer's done a really good job of it, I think. So there's not too much to pull out. I think the if I was to say anything, maybe the tonal values. So if we're looking at the side of this building, so you notice that basically this is a darker or a mid-value shape here, okay? And so if we darken this, okay, what's happening is the light is coming from the side and is getting picked up here. So we've got that. Then this side plane is darker, and then it meets the front of this house, which is then also light, okay? So that would be lighter like that. And then this also is a side plane here, okay? So that's basically the tonal values, and the tonal values here are describing that three-dimensional aspect of the painting. So those could be improved, and it's just a case of understanding where that light's coming from. So you can see here he lightens the tree with a slightly warmer note at the base, so that's quite a nice effect. That means it's not sort of such a harsh object. And then also some of these branches up here, also the weight of your dark here, Abaya, is all a bit, perhaps a bit, maybe a bit too heavy. So remember this idea that as the branches get thinner, they should also become lighter, okay? So he's sort of created this effect by sort of smudging and letting them be a bit more diffused at the edge. So we get a hard, if we go in here, okay, it's not a very good, it's not a high resolution image. So down here is quite hard edged, okay, quite defined, that branch, but as it comes up it diffuses. So that creates focus, okay, having a sort of more, instead of everything being treated loosely, there are some areas which are allowed to be a bit more in focus, okay. And the other thing was your sky, the sky may be a little bit bright, so it might have benefited from just a little bit of greying, so either bringing in some of these other colours, maybe some umber, something like that, just knocking the sky down ever so slightly. It's usually best to reserve like pure bright colour with this intensity, just for little bits here and there, I would say. So I think he does it by perhaps having a bit darker at the sky and then maybe the brightest points being down, again coming near our focal point there, okay? So those are a few little suggestions, but yeah, that's great. Thanks for sending that in. And on to Ellie. So here's Ellie's reference material, and this is what she did with it. So for those of you that remember, Ellie did a very nice watercolor painting based on John Singer Sargent previous week, and in it he'd done watercolors of a white shed with some dappled sort of reflections on it, or shadows. So she's done well here, which is to pick up another example of that, but in real life. And this is what she's done with it. Okay. So first few sort of things that spring to mind. So in your shadows on the white, you might have got more color. Now, this is the thing about, I'm going to talk about this next week, which is the thing about working with photography, okay? Is if we go up here now, what happens is photography tends to render things maybe a bit duller. In real life, we may have perceived color within these shadows that's not there. So for example, these shadows in against the white wall are slightly blue. These shadows here will be ever so slightly green. If I adjust the saturation, okay, let's really push it up there. So what that shows you is eventually you get to a point where you can see that the shadows in their core are blue and cool, and then as they come towards the edge they get warmer. Okay, now that's a sort of optical effect we're getting there, but it's there but in less of a form. Okay, so that's when it's desaturated. But I would say even if you don't necessarily see all that colour, you can have a bit of artistic license based on what you saw on the John Singer Sargent painting. So don't be afraid to play with those effects. The main thing is, I would say, more important than the colour is to get the tonal contrast. And in this case, these cast shadows are really quite dark. So maybe you wouldn't paint them quite as dark as that in your painting. But I think here they become perhaps a little bit too pale. And that's, so we talked a bit, well, I mentioned it quite a lot actually, which is the importance of tonal values. So one thing you'll see here is if we look at it black and white. So this bit here and this wall are white. Everything else is much more mid-values and darks. You see it's got quite a strong tonal design, okay? If we go to yours here, okay, black and white. Now, we don't get quite as strong tonal contrast. So there and there. So in fact, even if I took this one, okay, that would be the effect pushed even further. You see, we're reducing the amount of light and dark, but the effect we then get is more dramatic. So if you want to carry that into your painting, you need to be willing to darken everything else bar this white wall, and then you're going to get a more, I would say, a more dramatic effect. What I think it's a great, I like it as a composition though. I think it's quite, I think it's a good example of something very everyday. You wouldn't really think there was a picture there, but I think, you know, the cast shadows on the white wall, it makes it something. So I think it was a good choice. So yeah, if you could do a bit more in that respect, increase the tonal values, I think that would be good. Other things are a bit like in oil painting. You talk about the masses, and let's go back. So, you know, the big masses are the sky mass and then the trees and stuff like that. And then we get little things like, for example, the lamppost and the bench and stuff like that. So I would say with those, you want to be using like maybe a rigger brush, um, because the lamppost looks a bit thick to me. So you want to make sure that you're using a brush that gives you a fine enough line, okay? And you don't want loads of details, but just enough to sort of finish off the painting, okay? So little bits here and there. So maybe get yourself a nice longer rigger, and then you might be able to get these almost like drawn lines a bit more easily, because I say that one looks a little bit on the wide side. Let's compare it. Yeah, if you see, it's very thin. That's going to give you more the feel that you're after. Okay, but that's great, Ellie. Thanks for sending that in. The perspective looks good. I was going to say perspective all looks, I won't draw it all out, but it looks like you've done a good job with that. So that's great. So Rupachita has sent, well, she posted a couple on Instagram. So I thought I would just have a look at them and say a few words. I mean, they're really good is the first thing. So these are both of them. Let's see if we go into that one. So nice sort of blocky effect here. Now I'm not sure if she was looking at an artist specifically. I think she mentioned working on her brush strokes. And the main thing I would say here is there are two paintings of effectively the same scene. But I like it because it shows a development. Now I'm going to guess this one was painted first and this one painted second, because, and I might be wrong there, but I think to my mind this one works more effectively, and I think it's because the tonal values in the clouds, there's something about these chunks and blocks and these diagonal forms that seems really sort of integrate the mass of the tree with the sky mass there. So I really like that. And just great economy of style here, economy of means, just a few brush strokes here and there. But of course it's the right tone and the right colour. So she's getting the effect here of saying a lot with just a few simple brush strokes. So that's very, very good. And I think also I liked on this one, her sky holes are good. Okay, so again, she's kept it down to 3 and just kept the idea very simple. And due to the brush marks, they're not competing with the sky. So we're sort of getting the effect. So I think she's done a good job with those as well. So really nice work there, Rupachita. That's great. I love this sky as well. Strong sort of all these sort of diagonals helping to sort of crisscross the composition together. So that works very nicely. Good. Okay, so who have we got here? Stuart. So Stuart has got one here. This is his reference material, and here is his painting of it. And yep, he's done a good job here. So let's just have a look at this one. We've got so in photography terms, you'd say the sky here is a bit burnt out, which means that it's almost pure white. So that doesn't, he's done well there to introduce something, but it doesn't help perhaps with the creating interest. So we've got some blue down here, so maybe this sky was a bit blue. It's just the way that the camera has perhaps overexposed, but we've managed to catch all this in focus as well. So again, if we look at it under black and white, okay, so we've got light here, some light down here. So I'm just darkening it a bit there just to see what that looks like. So I think that's you know, really nice. We've got almost over half of the painting now with this dark mass, which is the green, okay, and then these smaller shapes here. So I think that works well. But as I say, I'm going to talk next week hopefully about taking good photographs, and what you want to do here is you want to expose for the sky so we can get something of the sky, and expose for the land, and that way you're going to get enough visual information for your painting. So thing here is, if we look at this foreground mass, this to me is, before anything, it's dark. Okay, so if we go back here, so this would be dark, which is a good, it's a good sort of silhouetted shape in the foreground. So for some reason that got very light in the way you've sort of portrayed it there, Stuart. So, but something like that. So you've done, all these little details, make it an interesting silhouette. That's good. Okay. So, but I would darken that, and then that's going to push these other masses back. Then what can we see here? So, so the shadow's a little bit darker in this case, but what I would say is, and you've definitely captured that, but I think it needs a bit more green, okay, in that shadow. Just so, and again, this is perhaps where we're sort of just working with our reference material and trying to create the best effect. I think just greening it out slightly would make that sort of tie up a bit more. Okay, and then maybe some sort of intermediate. Okay. Now again, this is where it's all very close in terms of its values, so it's quite difficult to make this sort of work. But I think, yeah, again, you try to look past the detail and see masses. So we've got these diagonals. This is the floor, so that's going to be a bit lighter. These are more like bushes, so they're vertical. So the effect would probably be for them to be a little bit darker. So I would have those darker. Dark. Remember what I was saying about simplifying the masses. So really the base is simple. Maybe it would probably be a little bit more towards the green almost. So you keep these masses a bit simpler. Dark for verticals, and then a bit lighter. Maybe not that light. A bit lighter on the planes that face up. Okay, so just like that sort of thing. Okay. Now we've got this dark foreground here, so I think if you look, this is probably a bit darker than this. Again, and even if it's not, if we lighten this a little bit more, okay, it's going to help to push it back. Okay, maybe nudging it towards the blue even. Okay, so that's, remember, bluing it, greying it, that's going to push that back. And then remember what we did, volume, scale, overlap, perspective. So bring in a dark or something like that maybe to overlap it, and that's going to help to push it back even more. Okay, and then sort of the sky's quite dark, but I'd probably maybe introduce a little bit of light, perhaps down near this horizon, picked up in the water. Okay, just to increase the tonal contrast like that. So those are just a few suggestions. Again, just playing with, always think in terms of these simple masses. it's not the detail that will make the painting work in the end. It's whether you can get these masses to communicate depth. So you don't need them to be overly complicated, I would suggest. Okay, but there we go, Stuart. Thank you for that. And here's Teresa, a very nice painting this. And let's have a look at the reference. So J. Francis Murphy. So excellent reference. Now I think this is the pastel artist Teresa mentioned to me. And so excellent exercise in sky holes. You can see these nice sky holes there. He's really got those. That's quite a strong one there. Obviously it's not a particularly high resolution. So what we have here is a nice almost interchange. We have a dark mass with some white dots breaking it up. And then here we have the light mass of the sky with black dots for the leaves. And again, look at this, how nicely this is done, these twigs, getting the feel of those twigs and the variety. So remember, one of the things you can get into trouble with this sort of thing is dab, dab, dab and getting the same size leaf. Here you'll see none of these leaves look is the same dab basically. It's all in different directions. And nice use of interchange. Dark line coming down here. See how thin that line is. So it goes from dark against light to light against dark. And that's a very nice effect there. Okay, so other little things. You'll see the tree mass, which is the vertical. Okay, the tree mass is relatively dark with the ground being slightly lighter. But overall, strong composition is that the land is basically mid-value and the trees are dark and the sky is light. So you can see there's a very strong tonal pattern there. So although there are some little touches of light on the ground, overall the ground is kept quite dark. Okay, and that's a really important thing. It's very easy to overstate the lights on here, but here we get a nice light shape of the sky interlocking with the dark shape of the land and the trees. So I think it's a really good lesson in simplification, this one. So if we look, see how Teresa got on. And she's done really well. I would say, so that lesson, the point I was making here, I think the lights on the ground are too light. Okay, so if we look here, you know, it's this simple idea of you keep the darks dark and the lights light, so you keep them as separate families. So in this case, yeah, the family of the sky is good, but round here in the foreground, this all could have been kept a bit darker. So I'm going to do a very sort of crude Photoshop adjustment there. We'll just darken that. Okay, so if I darken that, you see, I think that already takes it a bit closer to the original. And so it's just that you could have a few little lights here, but overall, that's what you need to do, is to see those tones, get that tonal pattern in your mind at the beginning, and stick with it basically. Okay. So other little things, the sky is very nicely done. I like the brushwork. Houses are all good. The execution of this tree is very challenging technically, especially if you're doing it into white paint, which might have been the case here. So I think the original, probably he would have had to have allowed that to dry to get that tree on with that sort of level of control. So that would be my guess there. So I think that's a technical point. And I would just basically bring you back to the idea of these trees. So if we look at trees, so you've got some light green and you've got some paler sort of green. I think what you're doing is you're overstating those variations within that mass more than they need to be. So there's a little touch of light green there, but overall everything is very subtle within those trees. Okay, just a few simple shapes. So I would say the lesson there is to treat those masses even more simply, and that way the sky holes are going to work more effectively as well. Okay, but you know, those are just some pointers, but overall I think it's a really excellent painting, Teresa, so good choice. And the sluice, yeah, so this is another one of Teresa's, so that's the sluice. This is her painting of it. Okay, there's the photo. So quite subtle tonal values here. So what I would say is tree mass is dark. You've got a dark tree mass against basically everything else is more like mid value. Maybe this is your light. Okay. So again, I would question whether it's the optimum time of day. I say when you're choosing to go out and take photos, if you do it at this time of day, the shadows become very dark. Okay, and in this case the lighting has become maybe a bit flatter, so that's going to make it harder work to get a good painting out of it. But I think overall you've done a really good job. All I would say, probably again, I would just reiterate this mass of the trees that cuts across, creates this horizontal here. I would treat all that a lot more simply. Just create it really as a dark mass first. So this is all, it's all vertical largely, and so it's dark. And then that gives something for these other forms to read off. But no, other than that, I think it's a really nice study. I like the colours, I like the muted, and that's again quite Suffolk. That sort of almost desaturated colours, I think, works very well. So lastly, we've got a painting here from Alison, which she sent in. So she did, for those of you that saw, she did a very nice Seago master copy last week, and then she's taken it into this theme. And yeah, I really like what she's done here. Again, nice muted palette, which is good. The only thing I think, she's got a bit of glare on the photograph. And so the tonal values. So what I would say about the tonal values is, if we move it to black and white, okay, what you can see is that this mass here, whether that's a tree mass, it doesn't have anything to distinguish it from the sky. Okay, so almost always, even if there is light within a tree or a tree is being lit, it normally won't compete with the sky for lightness. Same with the ground here. The ground is almost as light as the sky. Okay, so I think we've got some nice shapes here, and the colour scheme is working really well. All I would say, Alison, is to perhaps have another look at that value scale and just think a little bit about how to distinguish some of these masses a bit in a more of a simple fashion. Okay. Okay, so that was our landscape sort of submissions. So I'd say quite a few people have sent me their portraits from this week, so we'll have a look at those on Photoshop and I'll try and make a few general remarks. So first of all, we've got Teresa. So Teresa did this as I'm guessing this was like a warm-up study, charcoal sketch, so very nicely done. And this is her oil painting, which is excellent work, really good, especially as she's still, you know, getting to grips with oils. I think it's really, really nice work. And we'll just skim through them first, and then I'll say a bit more about each one. So this is Abaya. Abaya did this sketch. Again, nicely done. Charcoal. Phil, really good study here. Definitely caught something of, and this is often the case with portraits, is you will catch aspects of their personality, aspects of them, aspects of the likeness, and we can definitely see that here. So there's some really good things going on with this portrait here. There's Phil's reference material. Okay. And there's another. This was my attempt, which I did up at my studio, which I'll be honest with you, I'm not very happy with it. I mean, I'm happy with some aspects of it. I did this sort of, kept it all a sort of similar key, but I don't think I got the likeness. So I thought it might just be worth saying a few things about capturing a likeness, or perhaps how to start one of these paintings. So, okay, so I've created a sort of layer here which I can draw on. So I'm doing this with my mouse, so that does limit my, you know, how precise I'm going to be able to get this. But I sort of thought I'd make a few points, and this is on getting a likeness. Okay, so again, if we look at them, so that's a different reference there. So Phil's done a good job here. The first thing with the likeness is to try and get the general feel of the shape of the head. So the Loomis method, which I normally use, starts off with a ball. But here, so when I start a painting, I quite like these sorts of marks. Okay. You don't have to go around the whole form. You can just sort of find sort of location points. Okay. Now, of course, that's not going to give us our likeness. But you see, those sorts of marks, that's how I would perhaps be thinking of starting off if I was going to do it again. If we look at mine, I think where I went wrong is I got the head as too long. So what we're interested in is this relationship of the width, okay, to the height. You see, that's what's going to determine the sort of shape. So you could almost imagine this as a, try to think of it as a cube. Okay. So you're trying to get that relationship right, whether it's a square head or a round head. That's really one of the first things to try and aim for, because remember, it's the silhouette that's going to do most of the work in getting the likeness right. Okay, so let's get rid of that. So other things that I think you should concentrate on are, so Abaya's got this with the eyes, nose, mouth. Okay, Teresa, she's got hers. Yep. Sort of what you need to find the construction line of the eyes. Okay, so in this case, it's a diagonal down. You see. So they need to be in the right relationship. And then the nose, if you forget the middle of the nose, that also sits on a diagonal. Okay, so that has to be in the right relationship. And then the mouth, so forget about the curve of the mouth. If we get these points, then that's going to give us the, because all these lines are in perspective, they need to be really sort of well observed. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so those are sort of perhaps some of the initial marks I would be thinking about making. Okay, now in terms of likeness, what they say is it's this relationship. So that triangle there is going to give us a lot of information about the likeness, and then you could almost do the same to there. So how these things, if you can visualize these triangles, because they're going to vary from face to face, they're going to give you a better sort of, if you get those right, you're more likely to get the likeness. Okay, so let's see. So these might be, again, if you've toned your canvas, that might be how I would start, is to try to find those things. Okay, now then what I personally try to do then is to get the center. Okay, so that comes in. And the main thing there is maybe also this line. So what I'm trying to do is separate the front of the head from the side of the head. Okay, and that's really important from the lighting point of view, but also just to get the sort of the general feel of the skull. You want to create, there's a plane, there's a plane. Okay, so that's how I would try to think. So what I'm saying is get these landmarks, and hopefully that is going to improve your likeness. Now if I go to so this is the sort of thing you want when you start off, because now it gives it's a much easier thing to work into. And I mean, I'm saying this because I mean, I don't think mine's very good. And so if I'm going to have another go at it, which I would like to do, and I'm sure there's going to be other portraits, this is what you need to sort of go back to, because there's two ways to do a portrait. One way is to try and sort of just draw it by eye, start and go round. But then this approach is you're using construction. You're trying to get the big shapes first and then work your way down. So once you've got these proportions in, if you can get the eyes in, now if there's one thing that tends to happen with eyes, Teresa's done quite a good job there. Let's see. No, they're all good. Phil, I just perhaps ever so slightly overstated the eyes. Again, remember that lightest light is fine, but this part of the eye, that all has to be knocked down somewhat, okay? So if there is a tendency, it is to make the eyes a bit too big, okay? The nostrils, I did notice they seem quite characteristic. Okay, and then myself, this was the bit I struggled with, was his mouth. It seems particularly, again, it's the thing that perhaps gives him the character. Now, he has a slightly more protruding bottom lip, I would say. So in this picture, we see less of that lip than you might think. Okay, something like that. There's the... So let's have a look at that. So there, I think that actually that's probably, if anything, I would say was going to give you the key to the portrait. It might be this thing, which is that the top lip for me in that particular reference photo, you see it there as well. The top lip is definitely bigger than the bottom lip, and I think it's, again, it's just something to do with the characteristic of his jaw. So if you look at mine, I didn't really see it when I was doing the when I was doing mine, but there I think I've perceived it. So if I was to have another go, that's probably what I would aim for. There was that there. Okay, so those are just some pointers really, which is, you know, initially, so if you look here, top, top, okay, down. Right, if I put that in a box, so too long, okay, so that was the mistake, and it's just because someone's got a long face, perhaps the tendency is to sort of exaggerate it, okay. So too long there. The line of the eyes I think was about right. That was about right, and then I think I overstated the width of the jaw there, okay. But you know, this is what we're interested in. I think what I was keen on here was this idea of the close tonal values, not sort of exaggerating the lights and the darks too much. Okay, so hopefully you found that useful. Fills here, yeah, I think, yeah, I like it. I mean, some of this yellow, again, it is subtly picked up in the background. So you've done quite a nice thing there, which is with the limited palette. Other thing I'd be careful about is perhaps slightly too red in the lips. So again, if you perhaps look at some of the reference photos, it's not really red. Okay, that's a little bit, that's one of those things about how the brain is saying lips are red, eyes are blue, and it's sort of, so watch out for the tendency just to perhaps exaggerate that colour, and with the strong red lips and the blue eyes, it can look just slightly unusual maybe. So a buyer, again, so other main, when you're doing your portraits, look for these divisions between the hairline and the eyebrows, okay? Then remember this diagonal here, okay? If you get that right, that's going to help. And then also, how does that relate here? So here the nose is probably a little bit long, okay? So instead of that triangle sort of being like that, it's coming down a bit more of a steeper. So that triangle is going to give you a lot of the characteristic of the face, okay? So main divisions, hair and the eyebrows, bottom of the nose and the eyebrows, and then bottom of the nose and the chin. So in this case, whereas I overstated my chin, here's the mouth and there's the chin. So we don't have perhaps quite enough mass of the chin, and that will just make it will, you know, make it look, if you want a likeness, then you need to get that relationship right, okay? So Teresa's, yeah. Oh yeah, one thing I would say with Teresa's, which I did recognise when I was doing it myself, was this thing, the shoulder line and this shoulder line. They sort of don't feel somehow, where is it? Yeah, look, so there it is. It's like comes up there and then it's down there. I think what you have to do though, even for the sake of the painting, is you have to try to make those feel like there's somehow they would be continuous. So it's almost like there'd be an imaginary line. Okay. So I think it was just, it felt a little bit unnatural. So it maybe just needed that this one was just a little bit higher, and I think that would have worked. Okay. But those are just some little suggestions. And I think you've done the same thing, top lip and bottom lip about the same there. So again, that might be, but you've got the sense of the jaw, and I like these little scratching away to create the textures there. And this is for any of us doing this exercise. I would definitely recommend doing a few warm-up sketches. Try to loosen up, just sort of try to get the proportions, even if it's just in a little notebook. That will help you when you go on to do your bigger piece. Okay, and also, you know, have a good look on Instagram. Look at the people on who are submitting the work, and you know, see what's out there. And that's not only going to help you with your own sort of observation, you can also just see the variety of visual styles and all sorts of different sort of quality work out there. So I think it's a really great thing to be part of. So I would push on with that. Hopefully you'll join me next week. So on Monday we'll be starting the beginning of the second half of this term. So we're still sticking with landscape painting. And on Monday I'm going to try and give you some suggestions about going out and taking better reference photographs. So that's the plan. Anyway, I hope you found that useful. Thumbs up, always appreciated. And I will see some of you in Zoom, and I'll see the rest of you at another time. Okay, thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye.